Sorry about that. Okay, welcome everybody to our study session today. Today is Tuesday, October 10th. It's 4:51 p.m. And we are convened at the Provo City School District Board of Education. We're meeting today at 280 West 940 North in Provo, Utah. And we're going to begin today's meeting with a roll call. I'm Rebecca Nielsen, Board President.
Jennifer Partridge, Vice President.
Melanie Hall, Board Member.
Lisa Boyce, Board Member.
Nathan Wagner, Board Member.
Max Joyner, Student Member.
Will Widener, Student Member.
Gina Hales, Board Member.
Karen McCabe, Board Member.
Derek Anderson, Business Administrator.
Wendy Dow, Superintendent.
Okay, thank you so much for that roll call, and welcome to everyone who's here with us today, both in person and online. We appreciate you being here. Is there a motion to convene our study session?
I move that we convene our study session.
Thank you so much. Motion made by Board Member Hales. Is there a second? Second by Board Member Partridge, because she barely beat Board Member Boyce. Okay, so we are officially in study session, and we're going to go ahead and start with item number 4 on our agenda. That's our board handbook training, and that's today going to be given by Board Member Van Wagenen.
Okay, I'm going to be quick because we are short on time. And I don't think we've reviewed this yet. I was going to go over this section about requests for information, because I find as a new board member, I'm often needing information, and I'm worried about burdening district staff just knowing everyone's loads. So, really quickly, it says here, requests made by board members for a significant amount of information are communicated to the superintendent by the board president and or vice president so that staff workload can be monitored. And so it goes on to say that we should just be aware of resources and time when requesting action or information from staff. Assess whether a majority of the board desires particular information from staff before making requests. And when appropriate, the superintendent keeps board leadership informed of information requests from board members to staff. I think, like, looking at this, questions come up for me, and I know this is not the time and place necessarily to discuss, but, like, I think my takeaway is if I have questions, ask Wendy. It's okay if I ask for this information, or who do I go to, or ask Derek. And then an open line of communication where staff is able to say, you know what, this is why that's going to be hard for me to get that, and kind of work together in that capacity. So I don't know. I think it's something that I don't know if anyone has anything quickly to share about the best way. But I do feel like I asked Derek a lot of different questions about how things operate, but workloads are just a lot.
Yeah, do you want us to go through board leadership to Wendy, or do we just see Wendy?
I'm fine if you just come to me.
Okay.
You just come to me and Derek.
Okay, and then you can direct us to go ahead and ask this
Yes.
question.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay. Thank you so much, Meg.
Yeah.
All right, item number 5 on our agenda, student out-of-state travel. We'll give that time to Wendy.
So we have Provo High School cheer is going to Anaheim, California. Do I have a representative from Provo High Cheer?
You got 2 today.
Yes. You guys want to stand up and give us just a little summary of where you're going, what your objectives are, and then they may have some questions for you.
Okay, sure. So we are going to Anaheim, California for Cheer Nationals. We are following an itinerary very similar to Timpview High School because it's the same competition. It's held on President's Day weekend, so we plan to only miss 2 days of school, Thursday, Friday, and return Monday, which is a holiday. We are really excited for the opportunity to open this door for Provo High. We've never been able to go to a national competition. We've been competing for 3 years now. Allie and I have been coaching for 5 years, and we just were ready to take our team to the next level and have a new challenge for them. We feel like our athletes stay very motivated academically when they're competing. It helps them, be better students because they have to be eligible. We also feel like this is a good opportunity for them to just work harder because it's on a national level. And we've done really well locally at our competitions, and I think it's just time for us to get on board with a lot of other high school teams that go to this national competition. And Anaheim is the closest national competition to attend.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Vicki?
So I think Timpview's on a similar schedule, so this is not, Timpview's not here and I didn't have time to process it last time when they came. So it looks like there's 2 days for Disneyland, and does that add a lot of cost to like adding, so it looks like there's 2 days where there's one's the travel day coming home, which is Monday, is that correct? And then Sunday is the full day at Disneyland. I'm curious to know if did that increase the cost and kind of like maybe the reasoning behind 2 days at Disneyland?
So my understanding, after talking to Zoe Hill, who's the Timpview coach, they've gone a few times, so she kind of knows, she's in the know. So when she was telling me, USA, which is the competition that, hosts, they actually provide tickets that are like discounted. So it's actually kind of like a cheaper, like a deal, for a two-day hopper. So, yeah, it didn't, my understanding is it did not increase.
The cost. But the extra day at the hotel might increase the cost. And food, maybe?
Well,
They would be traveling no matter
day.
what on Monday.
On Monday.
Right, it's the same hotel cost, because they wouldn't travel on Sunday otherwise, they would just travel earlier on Monday.
Right, so it's not adding on a night.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think if I remember right, Timpview was saying the way their travel just got scheduled is they don't travel till later in the day Monday anyways, and there's not really anything to do for that first half of Monday because that's what's there at the Anaheim Convention Center. And if they went to the beach or anywhere else, it would cost more money because they already have the 2 days.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So that's why they were doing the 2 days.
We like to just stay, right there in the area and really Disneyland.
Right there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah. So you've already qualified for this competition?
We qualified last year, so we're pretty confident that we'll qualify again. But it's not until our qualification competition is not until January.
So when is the UHSAA competition?
So that competition is through the state, and that is January as well.
Any other questions, Jennifer?
So it talks about fundraising. Can you just clarify, can anybody fundraise to help offset their own costs as well?
Yes, definitely.
And what kind of fundraisers do you do?
We do a variety of fundraising. We host junior cheer clinics. We ask for businesses to sponsor. We sell, lots of things. Car washes, wig cards. You name it. We're probably doing a fundraiser every month.
So most students probably won't have to pay this full out of pocket?
Yeah, I think that we will be able to raise most of the money, yes.
Okay. We've really tried to push business sponsorships this year to help offset the cost of nationals because it is an increase.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, your junior cheer clinic performance was solid.
Yeah.
It was so cute. Okay, any other questions for Vicki? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, Provo High School Band and Orchestra San Francisco Trials. Tell us a little bit about your trip and you might ask some questions.
So we're scheduling a trip to the San Francisco Bay Area during the end of spring break in 2024. The purpose of this trip is to give the students a wider perspective on the professional performing and music industry. We're looking at clinics at either Stanford University. There's also backups with Cal State East Bay, as well as San Jose State University. And there's a couple other contacts that are available if we need them. We're starting with those first three candidates. As well as getting a chance to see some of the opportunities of that area, such as Alcatraz and Golden Gate Bridge, as well as some unique nature views available just slightly further south on the coast. So it wouldn't add extra travel cost to it, but the normal tourist stuff as well as the things they'll talk about for the rest of their life. Our travel agent is also setting up a performance opportunity for us at a museum in Golden Gate Park. So the students would be preparing for performance as well as a clinic and instructional opportunity.
All right, any questions for Devin on this trip?
It looks like students are getting $15 per meal. Is that going to be enough to cover food, especially if they're getting drinks on top of that or something?
It depends on the nature of where we're at. When we're traveling and stopping, that should be pretty sufficient. There are other meals, such as in the heart of San Francisco, that are being planned as a group activity, or the agent has talked about, if we can't find a group activity, increasing that meal stipend so that they're sufficiently fed. Yes, ma'am.
I have some concerns about it being in San Francisco with the things that are happening in that city right now and safety. Have you looked at other cities as options to go to that might be a better environment for our students?
I haven't looked at other cities, but I did pick this one in particular because I lived and taught there for a total of 6 years, and so I know places that are excellent to share with students as well as places to avoid. Our hotel is in Emeryville across the Bay Bridge, which provides a lower rate as well as a more controlled environment as far as hotel safety. And then likewise, I worked with our travel agent to, again, specifically pick things that are memorable and safe. With that in mind, there are parts of San Francisco I would not take a school trip, let alone my own children if I had any. But we've also carefully targeted as far as Pier 39, plenty safe. Same thing with Golden Gate Bridge and the Golden Gate Park and Stanford. Oh yeah, it's amazing. If you get the cliffs right, you can see the curvature of the area. It's so beautiful. But those are also places that are known to be more stable and controlled environments for our students. And then Stanford is a solid 30-ish miles away and still one of the premier universities in the country. Yes,
So my question is, it says you're going to 2 days of school?
it should just be one.
Okay.
The Monday coming back from
That's
spring
why I
break.
was confused.
Yeah.
Building on what Jennifer said, I think it's a great opportunity. Do you, excuse my ignorance, do you have a parent meeting? I don't have children this old yet. Is there a parent meeting that's required for parents to attend before you leave?
From my understanding, whenever we travel overnight, we are required to provide a parent meeting for parents that are interested in going.
Okay.
However, the parents are not
Required
required
to be
attend
there.
as a requirement for students to travel.
Okay. It may be a good idea, I don't know, I'm not here to direct you, but if I were a parent, I might want to know, because I know that there's been unrest there just within the last year or so. I haven't been there in the last year or so. And so it'd be great, I think, if maybe we talk to someone who's there, like you sound like you know people there, and then just let the parents know in advance, just so that they're aware, right? We don't want the kids to get there and then come home and say, look what I saw, Mom, and then they're, it's going to come back on you, and then us, and then Wendy. But I think just if as a parent, I think I would still allow my child to go, but I would want to know up front what's happening. So I don't know if that's something that's possible for you to talk about with them, just so that they're aware that there is an upheaval, that social
And
issues
what you're
happening.
doing to avoid the issue.
And I'm going to vote for it just because you're in a tux.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only question is, because I moved here from this area, I don't think lunch at Half Moon Bay for $15 is a reasonable expectation, for example. So just making sure that the cost of this really is going to, kids go prepared. So I don't know if that's in there, if there's a little buffer zone in here, but that's just something I wanted to raise. Even when you're at the California Academy of Sciences right there, right, that things are, food is expensive, drinks are very expensive, bottled water is very expensive right there. So just make sure our money covers it.
I had a question to follow up with that. This whole itinerary is from Bob Rogers Travel. I assume that's a travel agency. Is that a travel tour company, or is it a travel agency? Because if they're planning this for you and they feel like 15 is enough, is that like how that came up, or who's Bob Rogers? He sounds like a nice guy, but I don't know.
They're a performance travel, not sure if an agency or company is, but their whole purpose is to find, plan, secure lodging and events and activities. So if this is approved, he would be the one reaching out to Stanford or Cal State East Bay or San Jose and so on to actually reserve those for us.
Okay.
He was approved as a district vendor, I believe it was last spring.
So did Bob himself recommend the $15 for those meals, or is that like something? I'm just trying to get an understanding of if that was recommended to you, or if that's something like we planned on our own and maybe we need to look at upping those amounts.
That was the initial scouting quote. I gave him a total budget of this cannot exceed $1,500 per student, and pending approval, we'll be sitting down and looking at, again, a little more carefully of, if we're stopping at a fast food plaza in Reno, Nevada, 15 will work.
Yeah.
But in Half Moon Bay, getting a full meal for anything under 20 is hopeful.
Yeah. Okay.
I think my only concern is just making sure that our parents are very aware of, I mean, you have, what they're hearing on the news is Nordstrom's pulled out of San Francisco, all of these, you know, like, all of these vacancies that are happening, so they're gonna hear all of this. And I have been to San Francisco recently, and it is a very different place than it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. And so just reassuring them, there's a 1 to 7 student, I noticed you said there's gonna be 1 chaperone for every 7 students, just really highlighting those things, I think is gonna go a long ways into reassuring them that we're keeping your kids safe. I love that explanation of we're staying across the bay, not only for cost, but it's in a more controlled area. Just make sure you're making that clear. That's gonna help them. So.
Any other questions regarding this trip? Okay, thank you so much.
Sorry, I need to excuse myself.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Sorry.
Please do, you're fine.
You mean you didn't press up for us?
Oh,
I'm
In my defense, I came off the practice field.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6, the fee schedule adjustment for the Timpview and Provo High's trip to New York City.
Yeah, so previously well, this fee was not on. This year they added and lumped this group in with the other group that already has the fee approved. And because of that, we just need to break it out and separate it so that they are as separate groups and they have their own fee on the fee schedule. And so this is to essentially clean that up so that we're compliant with the state guidelines. And so there'll be this month for this approval, and then next month will also be for the second approval.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. We have to actually vote on it twice, or we just have to discuss it twice?
Vote on it twice.
Vote on it twice. Okay, so this will be the first vote, and then we'll wait for parent input and whatnot, and then vote again.
Correct.
In a month. Okay. And it's the AP art that didn't have it on their schedule, correct? But
Yes.
everyone else had it on their fee schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
I do have a question about it. Just knowing the area where they're going to, I guess 5 chaperones with 54 students, I'm just wondering if that's the right ratio actually for New York City? Just because if there are times when these students are doing separate things, do we have enough? Do we make sure we have a chaperone of, you know, everyone's gender has to be represented in a chaperone legally? Like, that if we needed to divide our chaperones into 2 or 3 locations, and we had a student sick that needed help getting back to the hotel, are we covered? And so that's just a question I have.
Same thought. We already have approved the trip.
That's correct.
Trip
The
has been approved.
Yeah.
This is just really more for the fee schedule. If we feel like we want to revisit that chaperone number, we can. I think that we've already approved it. So
Yeah, it's already been approved, and I don't know the statistics on all
Okay.
that in the data. We can always.
I didn't see it last time, and I apologize.
That's all right.
We can instruct them to up the number of chaperones, and I'll figure out a way to help support the cost of that, because in my mind you really should have at least a 1 to 10 ratio is usually what we're looking at. So
Barely
if you have
under.
5 and there's 54, that's
So close.
that's not enough.
almost like we need at least one more.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as a backup.
So, and they might be sending an administrator or something, and they have not included that in the total number of chaperones, so we'll just follow up with that.
I have a question about it being on the fee schedule. You know, generally the idea of the fee schedule is so parents know ahead of time. Obviously, I don't want them to miss this opportunity, but how are we then making appropriate use of putting it on the fee schedule? Like, how are we notifying people about this change?
So the change, from my understanding, is distributed through our district communications, through board meeting announcements, through essentially as we discussed, you know, what's approved and things like that. In terms of how it gets out to the parents, that I don't know. I'm assuming the schools are notifying them because they're the ones that are bringing these forward.
Okay, I just want to make sure that they're aware of that, and yeah, if they have any feedback before we vote a second time, that would be important to hear from, especially the families of these students.
I think to avoid this in the future, one of the things that we've talked about as a cabinet is that we're just going to incorporate a max amount for if there is travel, if this group decides to travel, what are they anticipating that cost will be, and we just need to let parents know it's still an optional thing. They may choose to do it, they may not, and then they put in that information. So when we're approving the fee schedule, all of that's just approved up front. That's how most LEAs do it. So then we're just approving it one time.
Well, and as a parent, like if sometimes I make enrollment decisions based on those costs. And so if we're then in a class and then there's a trip, but we didn't know, do you know what I'm saying? I just feel concerned about that. And also if parents have already applied for fee waivers, but then there's a fee they didn't realize was going to come and maybe they would have applied. Our timing has to be.
And they can still apply for it at any point in time on fee waivers.
They
right?
can, okay.
There
There's
is
nothing
no
a
restriction, so-
deadline where you've missed, okay.
Yeah, there is no deadline on it, so if they came in
Thank you,
tomorrow.
I didn't know that.
Gina?
Something really quick, and I apologize, I don't remember seeing this, but my memory sucks. So, I've noticed that there are possible add-ons, which is great, there's some great things on there, but what about our kids who are on fee waivers? We're gonna have to split them up and they have to stay at the hotel. So just some things that I'd like them to be thinking about. I don't even know if anyone's here for that, and I've already approved it apparently, but something I think that we need to be thinking about, because there's some, I mean, Broadway shows, saying $100, I'm like, good luck with that, getting a ticket for $100. And even at $100, we're gonna have some kids that can't afford that because it's not included in the fee waiver. So I'd like for us, just in general, not just for this trip, but just in general when we're looking at any possible add-ons, that we are upfront about that as upfront as possible, just because I just foresee some issues once you get there and some kids have the money and some kids do
I
not.
totally missed that too, because I thought we weren't supposed to do that.
I was going to say, I don't
You
think we
can't.
can.
You can't do that.
You
So if they're
can't
going to
take
do an
any
add-on on here, it has to be for
Okay.
everybody. So you can't create a bifurcated trip. Like you guys get to go on this part of the trip, but you guys only get to go over here. We can't do that.
You're on the brown level, but you're in the gold.
Yeah, we're gonna. I'm sorry. You get to travel first class, and the rest of you are on row 31.
I just, because that's why I say I didn't see the possible add-ons, but maybe that's just the brochure, so anyway.
So I will.
Okay.
That's not. We would not allow that.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I missed this. Is this AP class for Timpview and Provo?
Correct.
Got
That
it.
is correct, on both of them.
So they're both going on the group. Okay.
We actually have to do it twice.
Because I knew that dance was both going, but I didn't know if our class, both of them were going.
Oh, it just says Provo APR.
It
This
says-
is Provo Dance, Provo APR, Timpview Dance.
Yeah.
Should also be Timpview.
I think the reason that's not in there is because it was in their fee schedule, it just
I
wasn't
see.
in the
I
other,
see.
it just
Okay.
wasn't in these groups' fee schedules, so
Okay.
that's why.
Well,
But
let's
the
Yeah,
see
so
trip
what
it's
doesn't
Tip-
say
Trip itself.
Timpview art, it only says Provo art.
So this is for the trip that's being approved, but the fee schedule is being added for both schools. So we wanted to add the fee for both schools. So that way both schools have the same fee and have the option, but the form is, for.
The form,
just
we
the
don't
one.
have,
We don't have
that's right.
Timpview art, yeah.
Okay.
But it's going on both schools, just
Correct.
in case.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. All right, any further questions?
I actually have a question. Maybe Derek or Wendy can answer this better, but on the amount to be paid by student or covered by group fundraising, it says it's $1,700, and then the total trip per cost per student is $1,500. I don't know where like that extra $200 is coming from, like for that the student has to pay, which is being, or like, you know.
So
why
here's the reason why it's more, okay, is those kids that we are talking about who are on that fee waiver, right? They have to fundraise more than the total amount of the trip to cover those students that don't have either.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Okay, so we'll do our first approval, like Derek was saying, on this fee schedule change today, and then we have a month to collect any input or whatever. How do we do that? How do we let people know we're collecting input on it? Do we just put it on our
We'll
website?
put it on the website.
Okay.
We'll do it just like we do with policies.
Okay, and then we would vote on it one more time and review any feedback or anything we get before we do the second thing. Okay, thank you so much. Item number 7, the Shoreline bus routes. That is with Derek and Troy.
Yes. So what you have before you is, I'll have you go through this second, Troy, is the Shoreline bus mapping for where that school will be. And what it lays out is where the existing routes would be under the current state laws that are required. Then there are other options where it shows the different walk zones
You
that could
probably
be
need to
added.
project.
Is that not a, well, okay, I'll project up there, so that way everyone can see that. Board room. There we go, perfect. So, you want to come up now, Troy? Sure. Thank you. There's going to be some of this that we get later on, and I'm going to want to make sure you're here for. So, this is the existing map right here for what would be required. There's the 2 mile walk zone. Okay. I know that there's a conversation around, the mile and a half, 2 miles, right? Under Utah law, from my understanding, Troy, is it's 2 miles, and that's because we don't accept federal funds on it. So we're not held to the federal funding or the funding lines on the mile mark cutoff, okay?
Federal funds are a mile
Correct.
for secondary and elementary?
Elementary, 1.5 miles for middle, 2 miles
Oh.
for secondary.
Right, okay.
Okay, but in Utah, they've got it under state law that it's just 2 miles across the board.
For all secondary.
I thought, okay.
Elementary, middle, and secondary.
Elementary is 1.5 miles, and secondary is 2
Oh, I
miles.
was under the impression elementaries were, it was always 1.5.
So this would be essentially the map that you see is the walk versus bus, okay? Going down, there is the discussion of potentially creating safe routes that we discussed back in May for the teal and yellow areas. There's I'll just let you go from here, Troy.
Yeah, so it's the teal and the yellow or orange areas right there. So the teal area is going to be north of Center Street, and then the orange would be south of Center Street, both of them above the train tracks, which is the black line that shoots through the middle there. So if we were to bus those kids, the 157 would be the updated number from last week that I pulled compared to what it was back in May. So it's going to be 3 buses is what that would take to bus all those students in.
Do we currently have the buses, or we would have a
So so right now we're currently running 9 buses into Dixon. That would take us to 11. So we would be adding a couple routes into there. And that's where some of it comes into the logistical problems with, I have a bus that doesn't have a junior high route because of the time it takes to turn the route in the afternoons. We roll 8 minutes after the bell times, and the goal is to be to the grid for the next school 5 minutes before the bell rings to avoid traffic and students out. So for example, for like Centennial, which is the bus that I have that doesn't have a junior high route, but it's in that area, we weren't able to make it into Edgemont on time, so we dropped the route, made some changes, but that's a bus that I need to utilize to add an extra bus into here. They wouldn't be doing, that bus would still be up in the Centennial area because it's going back to Edgemont, but it wouldn't make it to Edgemont before the bell rings because logistically we have 17 minutes if all the buses hit the street at the same time out of the backside of Centennial. So it would just be a shift of some buses to get them down there, and then we'd also have to add in a couple other buses to accommodate that need.
So we would have to increase our physical number of buses by how many?
By 2.
So we have to add 2 buses on top of our replacement cycle trip.
Okay, so in May, we talked about how this was 3 routes, but currently going to Dixon, we are funding 2 routes for the safe route, so that this was only a difference of 1 route.
That's right, that's what it said.
So,
Yeah.
you're saying
One
that's
more
not
bus.
correct, what you were told before?
So the other buses that are running in there, they're on, kind of broke down into courtesy stops to where it's not full unfunded route. So, but with this area right here, that's 150 kids that, some of the stops we could probably work into, to add into them, but to get all of them in there, in that dense zone right there, we would need to add them. And exactly what it would look like, it could be, we would need to add the buses regardless, but as far as with
Actual drivers.
yeah, the buses and the drivers, we need to add them in. So, I mean, as far as like funding wise, that's, they're unfunded stops and areas. So I wouldn't be able to get all those in there to add 1 courtesy stop with, 10 kids on it into a bus to.
When he
get
says they're
forward.
unfunded, what he's meaning is all of these routes, the way the transportation funding works is they go off of miles and minutes, okay? And it's outside of that walk zone area. Because all of this is in the walk zone, we will receive 0 funding for these, right?
Sure, we're paying for it out of our own.
So we will pay for it out of our pocket.
I see, so we fund the route, but we only fund 1 bus. Like,
So
we need to
we're
add a bus,
currently-
but fund 3 new routes, is that right?
Well,
that's-
we have the
we're
other
currently
bus.
funding 2 on our own,
On our own.
and we'd need to fund 3. So what they're saying
It's
is,
one additional.
next
One
year would
additional.
add 1 additional
Okay.
that's on our
Yeah.
own dime that we're not getting reimbursed for.
So
Am I
that-
understanding that right?
And that's the way I've understood it. So we're saying that we would have to add 1 extra bus and 1 extra driver to the overall budget to do this plan.
But we don't have to buy a physical bus. We are going to utilize a bus that's not currently being utilized, and the way we can do that is by taking Edgemont's time, shifting it by 10 minutes, and then we can use a bus we currently already own, correct? Okay.
Okay.
I thought we were buying stuff.
Yeah, I thought we needed 1 extra bus.
Well, that's
so
what I
misunderstanding.
Okay.
So yeah, but yeah, so that gets us the 1, because it's 2 that we're, because right now we're running 9, this takes us to 11. So so the 1 would be that Edgemont bus, and the other one would be the additional added bus that we need to add in that we're currently don't have.
So we would have to buy a bus.
Buy 1
Derek,
bus.
will you go to the last slide?
Yeah.
Because what he's
That's
saying is
what's
different than the
there.
slide,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Yes, it is, yeah.
So that's what we were told back in May.
Okay.
We need to add 1 more bus than we currently run.
So right now we currently run 9 routes, and we were told we would need to run 10 routes, right?
Right, but someone just said 11.
Yeah, I
We
heard
just
11.
quick-
But the thing too, though, to remember is that we're talking actual numbers right now versus back then it was
Right.
projected of what the students were. So there could be a little bit of difference there
What is
too.
the actual
So this
number?
recommendation is based on old information? Is that what we're saying?
No, that stuff is, oh yeah, down
Oh,
there.
this
Yeah,
recommendation.
Yeah, sorry.
These are the slides we saw in the spring.
Okay, so that part, we know that's.
So what we're saying is, we need to add 1 more bus than we currently run out of DMS.
So right now, based on the current number, if we were busing with the current numbers as far as all the kids, all the students on the walking and the current bus eligible, we'd be looking at 559 kids with the current numbers. And that would put us right at 10 to a seat with, or not 10 to a seat, 10 buses.
Wow. We could be really efficient.
That would put us at 2 to a seat on every single bus with no room for wiggle and growth, and dead exact boundaries without room for movement. So
So what is the
Sorry.
optimal solution that's being proposed? Just so I'm clear.
Yeah, I want to know what's different than this recommendation we got in
the
May.
difference is going to be 1 extra bus actually.
Okay, so we do need
Yeah.
to actually buy a bus.
Yeah, because that would put us at 50 kids per bus.
Okay, and then, so we have to, so what's different than this is we have to buy 1 bus, plus we have to hire an additional driver, correct?
Correct.
And does that 1 bus that we're purchasing, is that only for these middle school routes, or can it be utilized in other
It can be
areas?
utilized elsewhere with the other growth that's happening.
Okay.
And that's, if we buy 1 extra bus and an extra route driver, what you do is you, essentially what, utilize them through all 3 levels
Yeah.
and condense route times across the board.
So then can you give us an estimate on cost, what we're looking at to add this extra bus and the route and the?
Buses are like 185 grand right now.
Somewhere 100, as I say, 150. Between you're around $250,000 for a driver and bus.
So we're talking an extra 250.
Just upfront.
Yearly. Oh, no, upfront.
And then after that, it's going to be around 70 for the driver.
Like your salary.
Yeah, depending on if they're full-time or part-time.
It'd be a part-time.
So if it's part-time, we're talking 40.
But the bus would be, but that cost, it is to accommodate Shoreline, but the extra bus would be used.
Utilized across the board.
So it's not just all on the Shoreline, it will be utilized.
Yeah, it'd still be used on, because I gotta build a route too, that somebody will come and work there, to get somebody to work 1 hour days.
Right. And we're already set to by how many buses as is?
Right now, our replacement cycle is 3.
3, so
about
we would
3
need
years,
to
so
do
we'd
4.
4 next year. And then add on the part-time driver.
And what budget would that extra bus come out of?
It'd come out of capital.
Capital.
So the bus would come out of capital, about 250 up front, and then about 40
ongoing.
after that.
So you said 250.
That was assuming they were full-time, so it was probably less than that. It was
Okay.
more likely like around 210-ish.
Okay, so if we approve this tonight, that's what we'd be approving is adding these routes, these extra routes for Shoreline, but also the price of the bus,
We have to
the
start.
upfront price and ongoing salary.
Right. So then when we come forward with next year's capital project or capital outlay plan, you'd see the 4 buses instead of 3.
Do we have the budget in the capital?
Yes.
Yeah, you still have this green.
So, we only have to approve this once right now. We don't ever have to approve these bus routes ever again. But Troy can change it whenever there's a need. Or does he need to come and have us approve any changes?
No, so if we decide to fund this, what I actually would recommend that we would do is put in policy that we're going to choose to fund this specific area and put routes in this specific area so that way it can't be changed.
So I have a question looking at the map, and I think maybe some of my colleagues do too, I kind of hear them over there. This area between the train tracks and the interstate.
Yes, that little
Yes,
sliver right there.
especially the part north of Center Street, the 114.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nobody lives there.
Nobody lives there? Okay.
Nobody lives there.
Okay, so I was curious why
I've been
that
there many
is safe
times.
for anybody to walk.
But
But
there is
that's
a
all
lot
the,
of-
that's all the industrial.
Yeah, that's a lot of
Okay.
industrial right there, yeah.
Okay, what about this south?
There, I
What
think,
about north of Center in that green?
this
little-
is 6 South, right?
Yep, that's 6
Yeah.
South.
There is an apartment building right here,
Okay.
but it doesn't go up. Nobody else lives up here.
Okay.
It's all industrial.
Yeah.
And
It's
one
just an-
apartment building there.
Yeah.
And that's a quick little walk right
It's a
under that
quick walk down.
overpass.
Yeah,
there.
it's
Yeah.
under
Yeah,
underpass.
the underpass needs better lighting,
It does.
I'm gonna say.
And that is
I've been
something
out
to
there
talk
frequently.
about.
That is very true.
One thing,
Is that
Oh,
something
go
we're
ahead.
working
can I
with the
point
city
out
on?
really fast? So still though, kids are gonna be crossing Center Street. I mean, right, this is Geneva.
Yeah.
So that's still, and maybe there's no one living there, but there's homes.
No, there are.
There's
a
homes,
lot
yeah.
in that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
That's the one area I would say was still tricky, kids who are having to cross Center, because that still includes that whole area where the freeway transition is on Center Street, which is
Yeah.
bonkers. And
So-
that's where we have a hazardous route currently, right? Where for kids who would,
Yeah, I see the kids up in the lot.
or kids who would have to
Over.
Because of the freeway that they
the
have crossover.
freeway interchange area.
That's why I'm saying.
So,
But we're shifting the hazardous from that area to over here, now that those kids are closer to Shoreline than they were to
Yeah.
Dixon.
Yeah, so it's essentially, we're identifying the hazard. What are we gonna bus for the hazard, as far as the train tracks and And now, is Center Street gonna be a hazard and bust that area up here? I don't have numbers on that area.
Can you
Well-
point out exactly where the hazardous route is right now when it comes to the interchange? Because I know that
It's
the.
on this slide.
It's 16.
Okay, I don't think so. I just have 6 out.
Right, I see
So so that's just the whole area, cause it's all,
Uh-huh.
you know, kinda goes to like right out to here, gets a little wider out here, thins out and then comes wider out down here.
Right, but I'm saying, right now, we have what part of our red in our current area is the part that would not be on a bus if we just went with the 2 mile radius?
So I'd have to pull that and
Okay.
get that back to you guys.
That's what I'm
But it is
wondering.
the 172 students.
Right, because I'm wondering if we've uncovered some of that with this new map.
If we
and
have,
put
if
them
we have
back in a
students who
walk
are now in
zone.
a dangerous situation
Right.
because we've shifted
Right,
the
because we've
zones.
shifted the hazardous area. Does that make sense? So we gave them a hazardous route on purpose because we were worried about the danger of that area. And are we taking that area and shifting it out of a hazardous area because we're shifting the hazardous route area, right? Does that make sense? Do we know?
Tomorrow, the safe routes to school meeting for Shoreline.
Yeah.
So is there any reason why we can't approve tonight what's in front of us and then could keep looking at that one area that just came up in question, and if needed, we could look at
Well, we don't
adjusting with
know
that
when
later?
the state is gonna
So-
redo, Geneva Road.
Geneva.
I know there's rumors they're remodeling it, but there's no.
I heard there was talks of even just like adding a new freeway exit or entrance up there. Like I'm not sure.
That's
if
on 800 North.
Oh wait. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Quick side note: the Safe Routes to School meeting at Dixon is
Postponed to November 16th, the city can't be there tomorrow.
So I have another meeting at the same time.
Okay.
So
I guess we
if-
have a
if-
little bit of
if We
time.
can easily table this and come back in the very next meeting with this area also.
So can I request that? Can I make that request? I want to know which kids currently are in a hazardous route area, and which part of that area is now being turned into a walk zone if we follow this new map
Yeah.
that we're looking at right now.
Okay.
Well, the hazard may not be a hazard anymore either, because the hazard right now is the interstate's in the way of getting to
Going
school
to
at Dixon.
Center
So we
Street.
have to then determine, is it a hazard to now go a different direction on a different path?
Under the freeway. Okay.
What is our definition of what is unsafe? Like, what are the sidewalks like, all of those
And is
kinds of
there
things.
a solid crossing area
Right.
that's right here in this area?
Okay.
So I think that we need to study.
I don't think that makes sense. Based on the photos you
Yeah.
showed at the city
We need
council
I'm
meeting.
trying to remember what I went.
Based on the number, if we approve these 11 bus zones, could we find out how many open seats would be on each of those buses in case we needed to add like a courtesy stop for one of these?
Yep.
So that would be roughly, based on those numbers,
Yeah,
with the
let's
11 and
figure
that,
out
it would be
these
about
numbers.
50 per.
Yeah.
So it would give us, with a packed bus, 6 students per bus, so it'd be 66.
Right. What we'll do is we'll bring this back and we'll look at that area right there specifically. You know, what we'll also do is we'll go and have some really good pictures taken around Center and Geneva. And so that way we can see truly what the situation is and bring that back as for the meeting.
So
It's
do we
also probably
need,
Center in 16. Is that, or what's the, this?
This is Geneva
This is
this
Geneva,
way.
That's Geneva.
this
Right.
is Center.
Yeah, this is-
1600
So
north
is that Center
or
in,
west?
keep going, putting your pointer to the right there.
Oh, this-
That's
On Center, right
16,
there, is that
right there.
16?
Yeah.
1600 West, it
Yeah.
goes straight down to Sunset View Elementary.
Yeah,
And the
so I'm
6
saying
south.
that, we should check out that intersection as well, along with the Center
The
and
people
Geneva.
who live
Okay.
north of that 1600 West in Center Street is a mobile home.
Okay,
Oh.
so I think we should look
Okay.
at both those intersections.
I mean, when I did bike that area, I didn't take as many pictures. Yes, I was concerned being on my bike in that area where Geneva intersects Center Street, because I remember thinking, I think this is the walk zone.
Okay.
Still.
so whatever we find looking into these other areas, if that's not going to change how we're gonna vote on what we're talking about today with the Franklin and Dixon neighborhood, is there any reason why we couldn't still approve that tonight? so we can reassure that community that
That's
we are
right.
gonna take care of the safe routes there, and then we could another
Continue
time
looking at the rest of it.
continue the discussion.
I'm-
Because for me personally, I would like
Prefer
to
to do
approve
that.
this with the Dixon and the Franklin and say this is important to us, we're gonna do that, for sure.
Mhm.
And then we can look at these other things and treat them separately in this case.
I'm fine with that. Is everybody okay with that? So we don't need to table this vote for these particular areas, but we want to continue to look at those that
The
are
other area.
west of the freeway and north of center.
Okay.
Safe routes meeting November 1st at 3:30.
So it's not the 16th?
The 1st.
It's the 1st. All right. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Any further questions from anyone on that one?
Thank you so much.
Perfect. All right. Let's see how we're doing on time. I'm afraid to look at my watch.
Yeah.
It's 5:40. Oh my goodness. Okay, Derek. Any chance you could give us the quick version of the construction update?
Yeah.
And hit all the important things we still need to know.
Okay.
Probably not.
Construction update. Here's where we're at on construction. Timpview has, you know what, since I've got this, I'll just pull this up really quickly. Timpview's elevator is, you can see right there, boom, being worked on. Wahoo.
Can we actually clap out?
Yes. It is on site. It is on site and being installed, and so that right now has, I think, been the final real big holdup. And so once we clear this hurdle, the path to moving into the academic wing becomes a lot clearer. Okay, and so that's where we're at on Timpview. The academic area, as you can see, the previous update, you know, where things were at and where they're at right now. You know, they're still, you know, it's moving forward, and they're finishing it from floor 3 down to floor 2, then down to floor 1. But we still believe we're going to meet the timeline to move in between the middle of November and the end of December. So I know that's a 6-week timeline, and I'm.
So like what? That would have to
So-
be either over Thanksgiving or over Christmas break, right? I mean, like we can't do it in the middle of school.
So it
Right?
depends on how we move, because we are on site, we can take the option to move, and some of the discussion is potentially do a couple half days to allow for teachers to move and get into their classrooms and set up their classrooms, okay? And so what we would do is coordinate with the school to determine when those days should be done. And we bring in a moving crew to help move and get those teachers into those areas. But there has been discussion of potentially doing 2 half days to allow for that movement to happen.
And that would mess up our 189.90.
It would not, because the way
Okay.
and then, so here's the site work. You can see also there where, I believe this is the parking lot, right? Yeah, this is the parking lot. See, that parking lot has already been torn out and ready to
Oh, wow.
have that.
That's the one we
asphalt.
approved last time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank
So
you.
And they putting new lights in there too?
And they're able to get the asphalt, because I know the plant's about to shut down, so even though it's about to shut down, we can still get it and we're
Yep,
good?
yep,
Okay.
so we will meet that timeline.
Awesome.
Do we know if there are going to be lights in this parking lot? Well, yes, there will be lights in this parking lot.
Looks like there's something out there.
Yeah, those right here look like that's what they are.
Yeah.
Wasatch, as you can see, is still moving on. We're, you know, a lot of site work and construction. I do have a question. Is this that aircrete or cellcrete?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this stuff is amazing. This is concrete that you can float on water.
Oh.
Right?
That's
Yeah, it's
sick.
really, really neat. If you have never heard of aircrete or cellcrete, just do some quick research on it. It's like a magical building material. It's really cool.
Like concrete but
And wait,
not
why are we
dense.
using it?
So
Are we
what,
not worried about water?
and the reason why they're
That's exactly what I was thinking. Why do we need to float?
So here's the reason why, okay, is you see these walls right here. This is the back side of the school, and we've got this hillside over here. What they're doing is this aircrete and cellcrete, they pour it in, And what it does is it takes away any lateral shear pressure against this wall. So that wall, essentially, if you were to put like a weigh scale on it right here, and then pour it all in, and to see how much pressure would ever move against that wall, it's essentially 0 pounds. And so they do that to help prevent any kind of movement of the building.
And is that standard wall, but building on a site like this now, I guess, construction standard to do this?
Yeah, and that's kind of what for this site, that's why they recommend it. Normally, you're not doing something like that because you're not building into a site.
How much more expensive is that than normal concrete?
Which honestly, I want to know, because you can build a 1,000 square foot home out of this material, manufacture it yourself, and build a 1,000 square foot room for $8,000. And so I'd be interested to know what they charge for this. Shoreline, as you can see, is moving along really quick. I mean, they've got windows in some areas. They've already got this being graded for that asphalt on the back side of the school. So that school is moving along quite nicely. One of the things that I'm going to ask the board to allow me to move forward on is, one of the things that we've been discussing is, right now we're in the Timpview project, and there are certain areas that are still left undone. And after looking at our reserves of where our capital budgets are at, I'm asking the board to allow us to, or allow me to move forward with our design team to start looking at designing and renovating and updating the remaining areas of Timpview. We would bring that back because that would be a cost to do those plans, and so the board would have to give them a formal approval to move that forward. And then at that point in time, we can get estimates to do all this, which would also then come back before the board for approval also. And so what I'd be asking the board to do is just allow me to start working with architects to start coming up with an estimate to design what it would take to need to be done on Timpview.
So, for the public's sake, why are we doing this right now? Why aren't we waiting?
Yep. So the reason why not to wait is, if we finish this project right now as is, there are areas that are left undone. And what happens is the state comes in and looks at your finished product and says, great, well, thank you for doing this renovation and updating to make this building safe, but you've left these areas undone. Please tell us your timeline of when this is going to get done. And so they have an expectation that we essentially come up with a plan to do this.
And if we don't meet that timeline, then our insurance is pulled?
Potentially, yes, yes. And so...
Just at Timpview, not the other school.
Correct. Okay. That is correct. And so what this does is...
Yeah, Ontario's about ready to have a heart attack there.
That's a lot of insurance.
So what this would do is also communicate to essentially state risk and the fire marshal that we are still moving forward with that project to remedy all of those things. Okay.
And it's better to do this on our own timeline rather than what we've just dealt with, which is kind of be forced into a remodel when they say we're pulling your insurance unless you get started. We don't want to get to that point,
Yes,
right? We want to be
correct.
able to do this on our own timeline.
That is correct.
Okay.
I see value in looking at what it would take to do that. I think that even if we decided not to finish remodeling those areas, they at least need some attention. Just the effects of the construction. I mean, the A wing, that's where they walk through the bus all the time, right? That carpet is trash, right? We'd have to do something anyway, so I think it makes sense to at least look. Is now the right time to like remodel those areas while we're already there?
Eric, will you just clarify, the portions when you're moving forward to do like this design what portions of the school you're talking about.
Yep. So the portions of the school that we're talking about, and I apologize, I don't know the different terminologies of A wing and I wing and for all of it, but it's the fine arts area where there's the auditorium and the music rooms. There's the front office area and the lunchroom area, and those would be the 3 areas that are targeted.
And so we would still not be working on the I-wing. We're not worrying about that part quite yet.
Not quite yet. That unfortunately has a little bit bigger or more extensive of needs, and so we wouldn't be able to do that with the funds that we currently have.
So just to clarify, the idea is that you'll look into, I'm just trying to make sure I write this down correctly.
Yeah.
You're going to kind of explore the process of what it would take to get estimates on this targeted area. And the idea is that we would fund that out of money we already have and not need to bond or raise taxes to cover that. Is that right?
That is correct.
Just not certain portions.
Just for
Just
certain.
for the pieces that we were talking about. And the whole point of this is to move forward and get out of that area and to finish the school. One, show the state that we are still moving forward and trying to finish this facility. As another, we can move forward and also use our reserves that we currently have potentially. And so that's why let's come up with a design estimate, bring that back to the board. The board's going to have to approve that design estimate. Then once we have a design, then we can go out and get quotes for a bid and for each individual area, and we can approve each individual area individually or all together.
So are we okay giving Derek that directive to go ahead and move forward with that?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to our large purchase request.
Okay.
Derek.
So what you have before you is a large purchase request. This is the fencing, okay, up at Wasatch, okay. So you have the price quote, which is the quote with the standard chain link fencing. You have the cost options to go from chain link up to black vinyl, coated chain link, and then all the way up to ornamental steel, okay? And then you also have wall renderings, the wall and fence renderings that our architect has put together. And so we're seeking to have one of these approved. And the board determined or can determine which of those options that they see fit.
When I'm looking at these options, are we adding these 2 together? So like if we want galvanized chain link and the concrete, we need to add the 105 to the 12, right?
Correct, and that's where that one, I've got it as 147 as the cost for the chain link. So it would be I'd have to ask him what the difference between that is.
I have an extra 29 on that one for fences and gates. That's for the labor.
Bingo. That's it.
So should we just add that labor onto any of the prices?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
That is it.
Well, I appreciate you getting the renderings because that really helps me
helps
see it.
I think it will look good with the chain link just because of how you can see. Let me see if these renderings will pull up. But
I feel much better now that
you can see that it looks, these ones, there we go, right here, you can see it doesn't really make an eyesore. It blends in with the color of the block. And I'll even pull up the next one.
So we just shouldn't add barbed wire to
As much as we want to.
I did have some ask Mary Smith.
So here's another with how you can see the chain link on the walls, and here it is on the the front face.
Those mature trees come with the chain link.
I really like them.
fast growing trees.
The future expenditure coming our way.
Well, we've already talked about looking into that, right?
Splitting trees and
Derek, this is not about the cost, but it looks to me like you could get over there on the brown part.
Yep.
So are students gonna be able to get?
So this front area down here.
No, behind the chain link.
Oh, no. So here's where there is in between these on the ends, there's a chain link that it connects to the wall.
So it closes it
on
off.
each of the ends, so it closes it off.
But they know how to climb.
I mean, I think we can't.
At a certain
but
point,
you're
that's
Unless we
on
do
the-
barbed wire, right, we can't.
Have like a cow, we cannot just do that.
What is
So
cost
you
to-
can kind of
can't
see
buy
it
it, we can't
on rendering 1, the first and second picture, you can kind of see how it closes off each section in the back of the school.
Right there, boom.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're 6 feet tall, correct?
Some of them I believe are 6, others are 4.
Some are
It depends
4,
on.
okay.
Depends
This
on.
one in the front of the school looks like 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And the ones probably around the parking lot pad are 6.
And I don't know exactly where those are at, but there is a combo of 6 and 4 right now.
Thank you for taking time. I know I kind of put the
Oh,
brakes
you're
on, mostly because I
okay.
didn't want to feel rushed to make a decision when these walls already kind of just look so overbearing, so I appreciate.
It looks so much nicer with trees in front of it
And
already.
that
But
one-
even with these fake trees.
Yeah, well, and once you have the landscaping in, it will make all the walls seem a lot less.
Imposing.
Yes.
Less of a
right?
prison.
Yeah.
Fortress.
Fortress of education.
Yes.
Okay.
So what are we asking, we're looking to approve this,
Yes.
purchase?
Yeah, the large purchase request of the 147,000 and it's like 88 cents.
That's the galvanized chain link.
Bingo.
That's for the change.
Bingo.
And if someone wanted something else, I guess that they could propose it in the motion,
Yeah.
Bingo.
right?
I'm good.
So we can just decide in the motion which one we're gonna.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, moving on. We're
Maybe 2
on
minutes
to,
left.
unless, are there any further questions? Sorry, I should have asked.
Can I share this rendering, these renderings or
You
not?
can, but I hope it doesn't set an
No,
unrealistic expectation
that's
of
true,
the
okay,
trees
I
and
won't.
stuff.
I think it just visually helps, like, the potential, I think it's been
May-
helping people who are concerned to me.
If you're very clear, if you can get the watermark draft across
Okay.
those, that's a really safe thing to do of sharing those pictures.
Yep.
If
So
it's on
we
public
can get
board-
draft, we
Is this
can.
public board docs
It is.
already?
Yeah.
So they can already get it.
It's
They
okay.
can already see it.
Let them
That's
know
true.
Sure,
when
that
you're
is-
saying this is
But
draft.
you will add drafts to it?
Yes,
so-
and so I can definitely add draft, and the other thing I would also clarify as you're communicating this out is these trees are not gonna be like this day one.
Right, they're years away, but maybe into the future, it helps to see how this can really become part of the landscape.
Yes,
in that,
yes.
on that side.
And so that's my
Right.
only hesitation, is just, don't let set an unrealistic expectation that, that all that greenery will be like that.
So my question is, for the business meeting, what's gonna be the total cost that we need to?
The $147,185.88.
Okay.
I believe that was.
Under the
number.
Hogan.
The original.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, number 4.
Any other questions for Derek on that? Okay, we're gonna go ahead with our board policy update. We'll give that to him.
Okay, here we go. This actually doesn't need board approval because it is a procedure, but it is a procedure that we are adding to policy number 4340, which is a policy where it's listed as religious neutrality. The state legislature has gone in and added some language that basically allows a student to, it's not just protecting, how do I say this? It's not just protecting the student from a teacher from exhibiting political or religious statements. It's also allowing the student to exert their right of conscience. And so we wanted to develop a procedure to support schools with what this actually looks like in this particular situation. So we've defined their right of conscience and religious freedom. We talked about that principals would review this with their staff each year, so we would put that in yearly training with it, and we would also notify parents of this process through the registration process, the online registration process through Power School. And so it basically states that a student can request a waiver of participation from something that is tied to the school, and we have an obligation to notify the parent. So you'll notice that in that procedure, request for a waiver of participation, when a student initiates that, and our first step is we do notify the parent that that is happening, so a student can't just do that on their own. And then there is a waiver of participation form that is also part of this, that then would be filled out and put on file. We can make that an electronic version, so it's easier. We just wanted to have that for you. And what we're basically negotiating is, are we going to waive this activity entirely, or are we going to suggest an alternative? And it does not have to be just curricular related. So an example could be a person is participating on a dance team. They do not feel that the outfit that has been chosen by a coach fits their modesty requirements. They then request to either not participate in that particular dance, to which there would be no penalty to that student's grade, or the coach would work with the principal to find an alternative. And so that would be noted on the form. So we just wanted to establish what that procedure was so that our parents know how they go about requesting that, and that there is a way where they can appeal to the assistant superintendents over elementary or secondary education. If there's a concern, we are going to encourage our principals to consult with those assistant superintendents, especially if they're thinking of, like, this doesn't fall within this guideline. So, because it states specifically that it has to be tied to a sincerely held belief rather than just a personal preference, but the right of conscience, I mean, pretty much almost anything is going to be approved. There's going to be very little that would not be, if you think about it from this perspective. So, and then there would be an appeals process through the superintendent if they felt like that something had been denied that should be put in place. So, do you have any questions about that?
I had an experience as a substitute teacher where one of my elementary students did not do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm like, and apparently his family belonged to a religion where they were not allowed to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Yes. So this includes that, yes, right? Definitely. That kind of thing. Yep. I had never seen that before, yep. So that was really interesting. Yep. Not watch and do that. Yep. But everybody in the class understood.
Go ahead, Lisa. So I know I mentioned this too. I'm looking at this policy procedure and then at the policy. And in the policy we have this procedure basically outlined, except not completely. So there are a few steps in the procedure. Do we feel like we need to add those steps to the policy as well? Like, there's nothing in the policy about, like, it says, like, who you appeal it to, for example. That language is in our procedure, but not, I guess I'm just checking, is that important? Do we need it in the policy as well to back up that procedure, or no, because it's in our procedure, it doesn't need to be in the policy?
I actually think the policy itself, and I put it on the agenda for policy committee, probably does need to be revised because it was not looked at for several years, and we need to add it so it doesn't just have the religious neutrality piece. It also it mirrors more of the 2023 language that came out of the legislative session. I just didn't want to go any further without having a procedure in place for our schools, and then we can go in and clean up that policy language. I just want to make sure our principals feel comfortable with this is what our procedure is, and we're having some sort of consistency, and we do need to go back and re-examine that policy and bring it into alignment with that 2023 language. I was thinking it was the same and it was just the waiver of participation that's been added, but there's actually some really specific language that's been added in 2023 that we'll put to the policy committee and bring that policy to the board in November. So I just wanted to update you on this procedure piece.
As far as like appeals and things like that, I do think that is fine to only be in the procedure.
Okay.
And the policy is generally
just as we're following.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't need quite all the specifics. I did just want to throw out there on the request for waiver participation, F number 1. It says the principal may not deny request for waiver unless the principal determines in consultation with the district assistant superintendent over elementary and secondary.
Or secondary education. Thank you.
Thank you. Do they need to do
no,
both?
We don't. Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Other than that.
That's awesome.
Thank
on
you
that
for
one.
working on this.
The next update I just wanted to give you, and this will go to policy committee as well, is that we did meet with the teachers for regarding political symbols in the classroom and creating safe spaces for the classroom. We really examined the policy of Logan City School District, which is what the policy committee had also looked at. The teachers really liked that policy. There were a few things that we felt like we wanted to change, and they appreciated that the language was much more about we trust teachers to be professionals, and here's the guidance that we're utilizing there. So we're going to craft that and then send that to the policy committee, and then once the teachers sign off on it, it'll go to policy committee, and then if they're okay with it, then we'll send it to the board to be updated in November and get feedback in that process. So go through that. So they were just very grateful for the opportunity to be part of that discussion. So.
All right, thank you so much. Oops,
Wait, can I ask one more question?
Please.
Sorry.
No,
On the
no.
waiver form itself, it has a parent's name on there. But they don't need to sign this form. Is that
You don't.
correct?
You're going to
Student
meet with
can-
the idea is
okay.
you would meet with the parent. So it's not going to be something where a parent's just going to hand it off to their kid and bring it in. I believe we have it written that
Okay.
there's a
That's my
meeting with the
understanding,
principal, the
too.
student, and the parent. So this would just be kind of the documentation of that meeting that would be kept on file.
And am I right to understand though that if a student requests this, the parents are involved in that request process, or are they just informed after the process?
No, they have to before
Okay.
the waiver can be filled out. The parent has to be
Okay.
notified.
That's what I
So
thought.
the
Okay.
parent has to be involved in the conversation at all junctures of this. So a student can't just go in and start,
I oppose.
I oppose this, I oppose this,
yeah, I
and
don't
the parent
believe
has
in
no
taking
idea.
a
Yes.
contest. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Those are great questions. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Sorry. All right, item number 11 then, district TSA plans for Derek.
Yes. So what you have before you is the district TSSA plans that were submitted by the schools. These are going to be required to be approved by the board, so that way we can submit these plans to the state. There will also be a framework, a district framework, that will be coming before you here in the next month to also approve. Once we have all of that together, then we submit to the state along with so for the grant application, essentially to get this allocation to us from the state.
So we already have a policy tied to TSSA plans. We are required to do a procedure that has the framework that basically lines out our processes about how we're spending money. So that will just go to policy committee and be updated. It'll just be an update that will come through procedure. So, and then our plan, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. Never mind.
Okay.
That's not relevant right now.
Okay. Any questions about the TSSA plans?
I did. I only read the schools that I was in charge of.
Good job.
A lot of them.
Yeah, same.
But I noticed on Franklin's these aren't actual goals in this first box. So if you could talk to Jason about.
So most of them are just so it is an appropriate time to talk about this.
Yeah, we're all gonna have the same question.
So it's all gonna come with the next item, which is our TSI plan. So one of the things that we've discovered as a cabinet and an MTSS group is that there's several different plans that schools are doing, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of understanding of how all of this unifies. It does all unify, it's just they're funding these goals through different pots of money. So the goals are part of their school improvement plans, which is what you looked at that were labeled as TSI plans, because most of our schools were in targeted school improvement. So those are those school plans, and then you have these budget allocations that are coming out. Like there's land trust money, there's Title I money, there's Title III money, there's all of these different pots of money that they can utilize to help support those goals. Unfortunately, they've all been in these kind of separate plan templates. So it's sort of like they've kind of had these overarching goals,
and then they've just put how they're spending that pot of money over here. So that's why we have that situation with the TSSA plans, is because their goals are listed in their comprehensive school improvement plan. What we are in the process of doing, which we will bring to you in November, is a new plan template that will be utilized by all schools. So it will have very specific SMART goals. There will probably only be 2 or 3. Research tells us when you've got, I mean, some of our plans have so many goals that you just, it's very difficult to focus, right? So then all of these pieces fall under the action items. This is how we're accomplishing this goal, is we're doing this for our multilingual students. How we're accomplishing this goal is we're doing these specific things for our special education students, so on and so forth. So that will be in a specific single template. We want that due at the same time that Land Trust is due. So they're allocating all of their FTE according to this plan. Everything is aligned in that one direction, with the idea that then we would report out to the board every 90 days as to the progress of our schools in terms of how they're meeting those goals and what adjustments we need to make. Some schools might come and need more resources, and other schools may say, I need to divert this over here and need to amend that. But their SCC should be very much involved in these processes, as well as their staff. So we just need to line that out more carefully.
Just to be clear, with TSSA money, sometimes they may not have the goal there because that's at the discretion of the principal of how they want to utilize that money, and not necessarily have to be tied to academic.
So that is the case before, but now it does have to be tied to that academic goal, and I don't think that's ever been established as an expectation. So, but I went back and read state statute, and it does state that. So,
that was a question I had, because I read that last night, and I was like, I am so confused by all the pots and letters. I was texting, I was like, I don't know the
what
letters,
do these
and
letters
the S's
mean?
and the A's and the I's. But when I read that through, then I went back and was like, I'm not sure there's clarity for our principals to know, like, here's actually what you can and can't do, or here's how you would need to justify that this is supporting an academic. Because a lot of these things you could do it as long as you tie that clearly in, right? There's clarity around how it's supporting, but otherwise I don't want us to be out of compliance with our TSSA spending if someone were to look and say, that's on the director list of do not fund with TSSA money.
So I don't feel like there's anything that is, like if there's anything listed here that we go through and look at when you're saying like, well, a playground supervisor, one of the arguments you can make with that is you can say, by the fact that I have fewer problems at recess, my students miss less instructional time when they come in from recess, so that's how I'm going to justify that. So I didn't feel like there was anything that we could, that we couldn't argue in that, but I think we need to direct our principals and give them more guidance in that. I just don't think they've known that those were the things, and so those are all things that we just need to work through, and that's what that TSSA plan will do, but also the template will fix that, and we'll be examining all of those plans as a cabinet to go through that line by line. We just, anyway, it just hasn't been on their radar that that's been an expectation, so, well.
One of my, on like the Centennial one, it has money for mobile desks for admin. Is that being justified under the same?
No, we can't pay for mobile desks for admin. So we just wouldn't authorize that particular payment. So when they go through and they'll put in TSSA funding on that, we would just say that has to come out of a supply budget. So there's something else that's tied to student supplies or student learning you can pay for out of TSSA. We would just swap that.
But they're actually using it in the halls so that they can monitor students.
So if they're doing it that way.
They're in the halls to reduce issues, right?
Yeah.
To reduce behavior problems.
Yeah.
It's not just that they're in their office
and they're like wheeling around.
That's a funny image. Okay.
But it is a good point, and if we do vote to approve these plans, my understanding is that then they are approved to spend according to this plan. Are you saying they still have to come to you and you could still say
we still have to go through, so all of those approval processes would still be in place. So we can still work with them on that piece.
And just so you know, there's always an ebb and flow with the state about, I mean, just recently I got into it with the state where they had denied something, saying it wasn't eligible, and we provided the specific federal guidelines saying, no, you're wrong, and showed them the guidelines saying that what was spent was an allowable cost. So there's always an ebb and flow of, this isn't allowable, okay, fine, then we'll take this expense and put it here, so it is allowable. Or, no, we disagree, it is allowable, and here's the guidance, and then they'll say, okay, yep, you're right. So there's an ebb and flow.
They will allow us to do, and a good example of that is, you know, a lot of times they'll come back and say, this isn't allowed, and then when we provide that explanation, like the mobile desks, it's in the hallway, it's improving behaviors, this leads to less instructional time lost, I'll be like, okay, that makes sense. So they just want to make sure we're not just making random purchases, so they'll go through and they check that, and then we can go back, and if it isn't according to that, then we can switch that funding out. So.
Okay. Do you want to just go right into TSI, because it's very...
Yeah, so the TSI plans are basically those school plans. So I really want to, I don't know that in the past that these have been shared openly with you as board members, or that our schools have talked about them openly within their communities and whatnot. So this is just a part of that process of having greater transparency and accountability across the board, so that people know that we value the work that our principals and our teachers are putting into this. There's a lot of time that goes into what do we need to do, and how are we analyzing this data, and what does this look like. We need to provide better supports for our schools in making sure that that they can do this effectively, but we also need to be monitoring that and making those appropriate adjustments. So this is just a step in that direction, and because our school district is a school district in improvement, we do have to let you know that we have shown you that these are the plans that are in place. You don't have to approve those plans per se, but you do need to be aware that we are working on those improvement pieces. So a lot more to come on this part.
And are these posted to schools' websites?
We can. They have not been in the past, and they have not required them to be. Only TSSA and land trust plans technically have to be posted, and if you're Title I, then your Title I plan has to be posted. That's why we just want to roll it into one, and then that plan is posted on the website. It's very public. They can go in and do progress monitoring and do a little sample report of, we did our 90-day data dive, and this is what we're discovering, and this is how we're doing. So.
Question,
I just want to say this is great, because this came up in a community council meeting that I attended. Like, we have these different plans and just kind of the lack of cohesiveness, and I think this, like, you're answering that question.
Yeah,
it came up to me, and so I appreciate it.
Yeah, we've just got to align it. It just feels like too much. I mean, even when I started looking through the school plans and all of the different components, I was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah, the amount of goals came up too. Like, if we have this many goals, there was concern for the principals.
You're just splitting. It's just you're just splitting your energy. And there's a way to really target your goal, and then your action items, and then you're assigning specific people that are responsible for those things. And it becomes a lot more doable. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's a lot more manageable than what we're seeing here. So.
That's kind of what I see different softwares being used. So one school says they're using Educator's Handbook, another school says they're using Panorama, and like, are they the same thing? Why are we using both? And then I also saw on one of the schools, they are taking a test, and I looked at all the tests. I think it was Acadians and WIDA and RISE, and there was one other test too. But I'm wondering, are these actually testing USDE standards? I mean, they're supposed to be teaching the standards, but are these tests actually testing the standards?
Yeah, well, and that's the other piece too. I think that would be helpful is a lot of the data that our schools get are just one time a year data. We need to be giving them some data that they can be looking at that every 90 days, right, and start looking at some of those lead indicators. So that's something that Anne-Marie and Nate Mitchell, our Director of Research and Assessment, Michelle Eldridge, are really starting to hone in on what are those lead indicators that are kind of give us some predictors that we're gonna have some success on those end of level tests, so that we can focus on those rather than just waiting for this one shot, you know, in the dark in May, and we don't get the results back until, I mean, those won't become public until almost the first week of November. That's really very late for a school to start making adjustments.
Yeah.
So we'll get a lot in alignment.
And something I noticed in a couple of the elementary schools is all their grade levels are doing great except first grade. And I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
What is this drop from kindergarten to first grade, and then they go back up to second grade? And can we start utilizing summer school to help these kids?
We certainly do that, or we can even start looking at, are there first grade teams that are doing well? Are there specific teachers that are doing well? What are the things that are happening there, so that we can replicate that? But those are the trends we have to look at. Well,
one thing with the Timpview TSI.
Why are you so obsessed about Timpview? Oh my gosh, it's like that's all you care about.
$15,000 in positive reinforcement rewards for attendance. Do you have any idea what those positive reinforcement rewards actually look like?
That could be a lot of things.
Are you wondering why you haven't seen any?
Yeah, I mean,
maybe you need to go to school.
My attendance.
They've been doing things.
My biggest straw in my attendance has been school board. So.
I have full faith in your attendance. I'm not gonna tell you.
That's a question we can, I can tell you as a principal, we did a lot of things, like you would give attendance tickets and kids could exchange them and get a sweatshirt. You would use them for dance tickets. You could use them for, you know, if you have a school store, you could change them in for that. Sometimes I would do tacos on Friday for anyone who had good attendance. So you don't realize how much it costs to actually do those things for a high school the size of, I don't think $15,000 is actually very much money, to be quite honest, when we're talking about attendance rewards, so.
Blasphemy,
Yeah.
Taco Friday.
No.
Yeah, they talked about community council, and they were talking about like the
that's a question for Moni.
attendance. Like they have a list of activities and parties planned. One of them,
Okay.
so one of the things
There was
that's
a
already
dance like a
kinda
few weeks ago. I
happened,
remember.
and anyway, some of those things are funded by this as an
Okay.
attendance reward or an attendance motivator to participate in the thing.
And that's, I think, one thing we actually talked about in the student council meeting a little
Yes,
bit too.
this was-
Or
Mhm.
if you remember that, like a little bit about like the attendance rewards, but yeah.
Positive.
Okay. LEA-specific licenses. Is Jason here?
Yeah.
It turned all the way around.
Hi, Jason. Welcome.
Come on up, Jason.
Thank you. My flight landed at 5 o'clock. I was here
Wow.
about 5:20, so.
Hopefully from Salt Lake.
In Provo.
No, I mean, you've seen Jason drive.
Could have been Salt Lake, no. Well, thank you for this opportunity. We have our list of LEA-specific licenses that we're presenting to you tonight. Annually, there's an expectation for the board to review those and approve those. So we'll be sending that off to the state. I think it's due by November 1st. And so that's why we have it in front of you today for approval. LEA-specific licenses are people who have degrees but haven't completed the process of doing the endorsements to get the full license, or at times they're people who already teach for us and we're asking them to do something a little different. A science teacher is teaching a new science curriculum, and so that maybe they're not endorsed in that area, and we ask them to teach that, and so they have to go back and get their endorsement while they teach to become fully certified in that area. So you see a list, I believe there's 45 people on it. That's up a little bit from last year. I think last year we approved 39. So every year we have people who come off and a few more who come on based on needs in specific areas, based on their content area that they graduated in. Often we see people, our needs in math, sciences, those types of areas, also languages. Do you have any questions for me?
Go ahead, Melanie.
So my question is we approve these almost yearly.
Mm-hmm.
Have we noticed that most of them get their licenses, like fulfill what we ask them to do?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, so they have a 3-year cycle that they can complete, so they would be on the list for 3 years that we would bring to you. But what we do, we track it very closely in our HR department, and working with teaching and learning, they go out and provide a lot of the support in the classroom. But we meet with them to see what progress they've made as far as classes they are required to complete, and people stay on track. We follow it really closely.
Right.
And my question was going to be, how long are you allowed to stay on this list? How many times can we give you a license before you're just done getting your...
So we can request different types of LEA-specific licenses based on what subject area it's in. You can actually do one that just continues to be an LEA-specific license. We've had weird situations where that's been the case. For instance, someone has completed a degree, and the state, for whatever reason, has chosen not to honor the degree, and yet they've taught for years in another state, and so we've accepted them and put them on the list as LEA-specific continuously. That's really rare.
Okay.
Like I mentioned before, typically we go for a 3-year process, and when the person starts, we tell them they have to be completed by the end of year 3.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions for Jason?
Yeah, I saw there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 teachers that are, it says they're working in elementary school, but they're getting a secondary license.
Mm-hmm. If they're dual language immersion, that often is the case. I don't know exactly which people specifically.
3 of them were DLI.
Megan Christensen.
Yeah,
is that right?
1 from Wasatch and 2 from Lakeview. Are they getting a secondary license?
Yeah, because it's
With the
interesting, the
DLI?
state actually approves the secondary license for DLI in elementary schools. So, so they don't, when people come in and they're working on that actual endorsement, they often move them into the secondary group. They could teach all the way through elementary through secondary.
For
they
DLI.
still, yes, they still
Okay.
call
But
it
then
a
there's
secondary endorsement.
Is that the
The
case
teacher-
for music also then?
At Rock Canyon, who's
Yeah.
getting a secondary license, but it's a K-6 music endorsement.
Same situation.
Okay.
There's certain curriculum areas that the state calls it secondary, but they allow them to teach elementary once they have it, and be considered fully licensed.
Okay, so I just was confusing. And Miss Hall, the preschool teacher at Franklin, is listed twice on here.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into specific people, but she's actually, I mentioned the kind of extraordinary case. She was approved by the state initially in paperwork to go and get her license in preschool. Then she completed the entire process, and then the state said, never mind, we're not going to give you the license. So because she had gone through all of that work and got pre-approval and then it wouldn't get approved, we have ongoing given her an LEA-specific license. So that's a little bit of a different scenario than most people go through.
Well, please approve her because everybody loves Miss Hall.
Yep, that's why she's back on the list.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, Jason. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to now our proposals for the Dixon site. We're going to give that time to Wendy.
You pull up,
I'm sorry, I should probably call you superintendent.
That's fine. Wendy's fine.
Be more formal. But okay.
I'm not very formal person.
Oh
Oh my gosh, Bonnie.
I'll get it, sorry. Just give me a minute.
So one of the things that we've been talking about is that we need to have a plan for what we want to do with the Dixon site, especially as Shoreline is coming to its completion. We have made promises to the community that we need to make sure that we're getting their input in this, and so we wanted to go through and identify some specific needs that we feel like our district has, and then from those needs we would start to identify and just start brainstorming some possible solutions, knowing very well that our community as a whole probably has a lot of ideas themselves, and we are going to provide some opportunities for that feedback to be heard so that we can gather all of that information. Our current needs, you know, I wasn't here when everything happened with Dixon Middle School, but knowing that we need to repair that relationship with the Dixon community, and that's very important, and we've heard that from our Board of Education. That's very important for all of our board members, and it's important with our entire district leadership team. I also had Director Clay Bingham, who is our CTE director, identify some specific ideas as well as we're looking at opportunities for high school students. And our CAPS program is currently housed at the New Skin facility, and we have that available to us for a little while. But at some point, we know that there could be a situation where they say, you can't be here anymore, and it would be a good idea to have a location for that CAPS program that both our Timpview and our Provo High students could access. So we're not relying on another entity for that. We also have kind of assessed our vocational and technical education offerings. We do offer a lot of programs through MTech, but there are several of those programs that fill up very quickly. And so those might be programs where we could actually house them in our own district. Several other districts have more robust vocational and technical education offerings to provide opportunities beyond just, you know, go to college. We still want students to be pushing and getting training and further education after high school. And he has a pretty good idea of a lot of those things that are high demand areas that we're lacking. So providing a place where we could do that would also be something that would fulfill our needs. And then we have a lot of community resources that are needed in our Dixon area in particular. So adult education, English classes for the community, offering community education programs and classes, and housing it where people could actually walk to it or get to it more easily than if it were at other locations is very appealing. And we kind of were looking at, we need to house these different programs, but if we put them in schools, say for example, where we have that space, it's not necessarily going to make them accessible to the community that would be more than likely to use it. We also, Assistant Superintendent Jensen and I went and visited East Bay Post High. That is our school for our 18 to 22-year-olds, for our special education students. That facility is really, it's not troubling to me, it's just fine. They need more space though. That the people are extremely dedicated there and doing a phenomenal job with what they have available to them, but really looking at some opportunities to actually put them in a school setting. They're basically in a strip mall right now, and having that accessible so they can still access work sites. Dixon Middle School, that site is actually a really great location for that, so that was another suggestion. Right now they kind of just feel like they're on the outskirts of the district. And then, you know, really protecting, I've heard from lots of people, protecting that green space for the Dixon community is very important. And so making sure that it doesn't become, you know, a parking lot or, you know, something that, a what? Apartment complex, you know, something like that. We really want to protect that for the Dixon community. We've also kind of talked about, as we're trying to retain employees or even attract employees, some of the things that other districts have done is they've provided a daycare or a preschool for employees. And there are districts that actually fund those daycare and preschool programs as a part of their, like, an education career pathway. And so they have students that actually work in those areas and they're earning college credits while they're doing it. But it also provides daycare at a fraction of the cost. So that was an idea that we also had, that possibly that might be, because of the location of where it's at, that might be very positive for our employees. We also talked about our middle schools being kind of pushing at capacity. Certainly Timpview is also well beyond capacity. Provo High School, if it gets much bigger. So we talked a little bit about, is there a way to alleviate some of those population pressure at the secondary school so that there would be a school at that site, and what might that look like? We've also talked about dual language immersion concerns, and when I say concerns, I'm meaning more along the lines of, like, we have 2 classes for our DLI students, but then we only have 1 classroom for our non-DLI students. So if there are issues that come up with peers or things like that, we don't have a lot of options for the students that are non-DLI when they're centered in a DLI school. So is there a way to resolve that? We also need a district office campus. Our campus is kind of spread out, and nobody really cares about that, and I totally understand that, but it is a need that we have. So our employees really care about it, and we could use a better facility for a lot of different things. And then we've also talked about how several high schools are now going towards the use of they're building field houses, basically, where it expands the athletic practice space for students, because it'll do like a half of a football field. You can do lacrosse in it, you can do soccer in it. With our weather, also, it expands that practice time, especially for our spring sports, where we have a lot of issues and demands on that space. So, there is a need for some practice space, and it probably would be more economical to have that space available for both high schools to use a single space, rather than building one for each school. And furthermore, we don't have room at one of our high schools to build additional space like that. So those are some of the needs that we have. Do you have any questions about any of those before I move on?
Can I just clarify, when you said the population in the middle schools, Centennial is pretty
Centennial
tight, but
is, yes.
Shoreline is not tight
No.
as we move into it.
No, correct.
There's plenty of room there.
Correct. Thank you for that clarification. Next slide. So here were just some ideas that we had kind of talked about based on those needs. I wanted to present to the board to start looking at and have an opportunity to have a conversation to brainstorm additional ideas, and then create a plan for how we would take this out to the community to have feedback. So one option would be to create a 7 through 12, and we could do this a variety of ways. It could be a 7 through 12 STEAM school. If people are unfamiliar with a STEAM school, it's a science, technology, engineering, arts, and math school. This could be a place where you house the CAPS program, where we house engineering, robotics, coding, aviation. We could do the education pathways there. And for students that were really interested in that, then they would experience their secondary experience at this location. It would be kind of like a magnet school for 7 through 12. Students could still participate in their extracurricular activities tied to their feeder high school. So that wouldn't be an obstacle for that. And it would provide, we would still have a playground and green space as part of possibly a preschool and daycare. And because it is still a school, that green space would still be preserved. There's also an option of just making it a 9 through 12 and totally taking that into a career and technical education program. So we could even make it more robust, just 9 through 12, and both Timpview, Independence, and Provo could utilize that, as many districts do, and they schedule 2 class periods and participate in different things that way. So next slide. Some concerns: there would be some transportation costs to ensure any student district-wide could participate. We would likely need to bond for this, although in talking with Derek, that bonding would not increase our property taxes. That would be our goal. That's our goal. We can't make promises like that, but that would be our goal. It doesn't find space for our other programs, like our adult ESL, English as a Second Language programs, or East Bay post-high programs. And would students want to take advantage of a school like this? Like, we think that this is something that's very attractive, but is it really? And so then do we build a school and then we don't have students that want to take advantage of it? Please, Will.
I mean, this seems really similar to like what UCAS is. I wonder, like, are we going to have competition with people trying to choose between UCAS and this?
No, we'll beat them. No, I'm just kidding. I love that attitude. I would love nothing more than to attract those students back to our schools, and to show that we have tremendous opportunities. But at the same time, that's why too you could go with a 9 through 12 and do it more like a Jordan Applied Technical Center, for example, and you could have a health sciences piece of it. We could have lots of different components to it. So I think there's a lot of options within this that I didn't want to spell out specifically, so that kind of addresses that concern as well if we were worried about that and not wanting to create ill will, right, with our neighbors. So thank you for bringing that up. Next slide. Another option would be to create a community resource center. We could house East Bay Post High there. And when I say 18 to 22, it's 18 to 22-year-old students with disabilities. It's not that we are only housing 18 to 22 students total. I should have made that clearer, so I apologize. We could have adult education or English classes, other community education classes, and it could really be a community hub. That's certainly an option. Next slide. Benefits, it provides that space. The green space is still preserved, provides better services for students with disabilities. I think sometimes that is not always a focus that we have and needs to be more at the forefront of decisions that we make. Next slide. Some of the concerns, doesn't alleviate that pressure on our secondary schools, on Centennial and Timpview in particular. And it can be difficult to provide a daycare in a community center if you don't have the courses tied to it. And sometimes we do have to be careful about where we put an East Bay Post High because they are adult students, and putting them in proximity with very young children we would have to troubleshoot that, right? We would have to look at those things. So that creates a concern. Not necessarily a barrier, just a concern. Another idea is to have a district office campus. We could do an East Bay Post High and all district departments in one location. A benefit is then you're not opening another school. I think one of the things we have to think about is when you open another school, you're adding a whole other layer of staff. So that's another principal, that's another administrative assistant, that's another cafeteria manager. It's all of those pieces, and that's awesome. If that's what we need, then that's what we need to do to support our students. We were also kind of talking about it puts our district departments in the community that needs the support sometimes the most from the district, although I believe we would have to really show that we are supportive of that community and rebuild that trust. So daycare and preschool to recruit employees, still keeping a green space available. I think we've established that that's very important to the community there. Concerns, not really a priority for I don't know that it's a priority for anybody in Provo City School District, like I said, except for the employees. It's very much a priority for them. It also does not solve the problems for the CAPS program location, expansion of that technical or vocational educational opportunities. And it is to be noted, we have other areas we can put a district office campus. So that's important to know as well. Next option is we could just convert it to a park and take some time to decide the best use for this space. If we feel like we don't want to rush this, this cost would be significantly lower. We could make it very beautiful and make that kind of commitment. I think we would have to, that becomes difficult because it's this board that's making that decision. How do you prevent future boards from not undoing that decision? It's a lot easier when you build a building on it. It's harder to convert that back to something else. So concerns with that, doesn't adequately address the other needs that we have as a district. So as I said, these are just a couple of ideas. Next slide, go ahead, Bonnie. And why not an elementary school on the Dixon site? Because currently right now we actually have more capacity at the elementary level than we do students. So if we did decide to put an elementary school there, we do need to identify that we would probably need to close 1 or 2 elementary schools elsewhere, and there would be probably some district redrawing of boundaries, which is always a favorite discussion of every community. And so that has some significant costs if we do that. The secondary piece, not so much, because I think that is going to draw students from all over the district. So We could move an elementary school to this site and then use that other elementary school for district office space. Generally when we do that, we're just ending up pulling from one high needs neighborhood to another high needs neighborhood. I don't think that's a very popular decision. As I said, never popular to close or move an elementary school. So things to consider there. Next slide. So next steps. Ask questions. I think our next steps are to get feedback from our community. I think we could do this in a variety of ways. At whatever direction you would give us, then we can start this process. In-person meetings, it could be through surveys, it could be focus groups. I would ask that as the community is exploring these ideas, I think it's really easy to come up with, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. I love that. Great. Tell me what you don't like, but also give me an alternative. So identifying what the needs are, but also identifying what is an alternative that we could use, and really brainstorming, because I do think we come up with better ideas when we all work together in that. And then we would bring that feedback back to the full board. I think there would want to, like Terry and Gina are going to want to be very heavily involved in this conversation and what this looks like. And then the Board of Education would narrow this to 2 or 3 options to actually start identifying costs and a timeline as to what we need to do. So I think the next slide just says questions.
Okay.
I'm ready. I'm going to start writing down all of my to-dos. Because I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of to-dos.
Okay, can we go back to that slide that says next steps, so we can just take a look at that really quick? And okay, so for the rest of the board, and I think what we need to talk about first is how we want to get feedback from the community. Or does anybody else feel like there's anything else we need to talk about there? We've kind of...
You mean other options?
Yeah,
or
well, yeah, we want to get their feedback on possible ideas that we already have, but obviously I think we want to get any other ideas they have that meets our needs, right?
And if
we're not limited to those. Those were just ideas.
Yeah, and if you already have other ideas, I think we need to start putting those together, because we can add that to whatever we want in terms of getting feedback from the community. So
does anybody have any thoughts on how we should go ahead and start gathering feedback?
I think that for my community, Dixon, Timpanogos neighborhoods, I'd like to have an in-person meeting. And I don't know if we need to do that for all of them. I don't know. But I think for my community, it's going to be important to have at least an in-person meeting, and probably also a survey option for those who can't make it to the meeting. There's a lot of interest in this, obviously, because that's where we live. So I would like to see, if possible, both in my area.
how soon would you like us to start moving on that, Gina? What are your thoughts about that?
Let me look at my calendar.
Okay, that's fair.
I do think it needs to be this school year. Because we are moving Shoreline in 2024, and we'd like to have a solid plan in place, because there is, I appreciate you putting up there that the trust needs to be rebuilt, because it's gone, right? And so we need to be able to have a plan so that, and as much as I try to reassure them, I'm one of 7, right? And so I will say that there's a almost complete lack of trust in the board, minus 1 or 2 of us. And so if we can rebuild that trust, and I do think that having it done sooner than later will be helpful.
Got it. Can I ask a question? On the in-person meetings, I can see like the need to have the board members who already have their constituents there being present. I also can see, as someone new to this conversation, a benefit, because I don't have any relationship there, to being part of that. Like, but it's difficult, we can't all be there. Like, what are the ways we could do this where we can be reaching out and hearing from people more directly, maybe? I mean, maybe just be thinking of some ways we could do that.
Other than the in-person meetings?
Yes, because we can't really all 7 come
Well,
to an
we
in-person.
can do multiple meetings like we did for the superintendent hiring.
We can actually all be there. We noticed it, but we're also not making any decisions.
Right, we're
there,
not making any
so
decisions.
that's what I'm,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
as long
great.
as you're not making any decisions, then.
Yeah,
then.
Awesome. I would love to be there, because I would love to hear from people directly.
It also helps, I also think, to Lisa's point, it helps you that aren't living in that community communicate with your community about why this is so important and how we can all get on board with supporting our entire Provo community. Yeah. Will, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, I think you could probably even just schedule a study session and say this is public input. You could then all be there under the Public Meetings Act, but... Okay.
Right, if we made it a public meeting,
Mhm.
that's totally acceptable, right? I like the idea of in-person meetings as well. I think that's a good option. How well do you think surveys, when we're thinking surveys, are we thinking citywide, west side? I mean, like there's so many different ways to think of this. The entire west side feeds into
No,
Dixon,
you just
right?
put a answer in there that says which schools do your kids attend.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if we're talking about possibilities of sort of bonding, that's the entire
part of that
so
conversation.
everyone needs to be part of that conversation.
If there were to be a magnet program or East
Or
Bay Post
any
High,
of that,
any of
yeah,
those of our
that's
whole
the entire
district.
district.
I see a lot of value in having community night where we can get input. I'm also wondering the scope of this. Do we need to get a group of citizens together? And I hate saying the words because I know there's some thoughts that it's like a facilities advisory committee, right? but I do see value. I mean, I know some people think we've already made up our mind, but I look at this and I'm like, there are so many options, so many needs, so many possibilities. I mean, how any one person can know exactly where we're going to go next. I mean, we don't. And I think the more heads we have on this, but if we had a group that included citizens in helping us, that were invested, that could take the time to really look at some of these details, that the general community might be able to give us some general ideas, but they're not going to have the time to look into this as in depth and really help us brainstorm what is going to be the best. And it's unfortunate the timing of how all of this is hitting, because I think it's really important that we move on this, and yet we need to be thoughtful of what is going to be best for our district. And I feel, as you were talking about some of those things, and like we need to have our portrait of a graduate in place. Our strategic plan that we're working on this year, ideally we have all of that figured out, and that guides what are our needs, what are our biggest priorities, what could this facility do for us. But I hate how then we do wait, that slows down what we can do with that property, and I don't want to see it empty. And I agree with you that making a park in the meantime is a hard choice to do.
Construction committee, like we did with Shoreline and Wasatch, and make it open to the public and anyone can attend.
Well, and I think the, you know, kind of to Gina's point, I think even if we could have like 3 options by the time our strategic plan is done, then what could guide us as to those 3 options, which one we're going to choose, right, would be based on that portrait of a graduate and the strategic plan. We'd have some time to really pull some hardcore data so that we can really say this is how many students it could potentially hold. We can have, you know, with those 3 options, for example, then we actually can go and get some designs done and have some more specific details about cost and benefits. And right now we're talking really in a hypothetical and sort of way. So it's hard to even start getting feedback without that. So I do like the idea of a really focused committee, and then they make some recommendations, and then you give Derek and I some
Gina and Meg had already did that, right?
We started kind of thinking about how we could, who would make up the committee, how would we make sure that the Dixon community was well represented, but also balancing out the whole city being in. And I don't.
We couldn't come up with anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard.
Nobody agreed, so that's why it's like, it sounds like a great idea, but no one can agree on who should be on the committee and how much weight should be given. So I am not necessarily against the facility advisory committee, but I am against 300 people on a facility advisory committee.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And then we have to figure out a way that the neighborhood that's being the most affected has not the final voice, but
It's
We
weighted.
we weight it, but that's not a popular idea either, and so it's like, oh geez, I don't know, I gave up.
Yeah, you have to start with the conversation, in my perspective, an in-person conversation in the Dixon neighborhood. I don't think we can actually go too far down the path yet of what comes next until we just start there and listen. So like, could we, that seems like a
We just start
good
there
first
and just
step,
see.
you know, because
I
if we
believe it-
dictate a plan, then we already have a plan.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why would we have a listening session if we already knew what we were gonna do? I don't think, as someone who doesn't love the options so far, I see the needs, I can't quite get my brain around them. I would love to just start by hearing what people feel and showing them. I love showing them, like, here are needs that we are talking about. You probably have needs that you're thinking about in your community. Like, how can we kind of just listen at first? Because there are needs beyond our capital facility needs too, right? And so I think that conversation seems like a good place to start.
We should have a therapist there who's not me.
That's fair. I believe that if we get a good list of potential options, like through what you're saying, which is getting feedback from the community, also layering on our needs, and then as we put that out to the public across as a whole to say, rank as a top 2 or a top 3 based off of this list, they will see our needs, and the community as a whole will coalesce around a 2 option kind of thing. And it's like, hey, what's our greatest need, and what's the public's top choice? And I believe that they'll see that and they'll align, right? But as long as we go through that process, get the feedback, and we draft our message about what we need, the community will rally around it, believe, essentially. You know, they're not going to be able to rally around everything, but once you start layering out all those options and they see our needs also, they're not going to recommend putting a water park on there, right? They see that that's not a need. Right?
Well, and especially if we're seeing their needs as
Too.
well, right?
Yes,
And
exactly.
so that's a give and take conversation. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, but I think balancing out what maybe the Dixon community feels needs are based on, once again, you know, the whole school district across the city. And I guess the concern that comes up is the priority it is for us and the Dixon community, and then others around the city being like, well, no, you know, we still need to do work on Timpview or whatnot. And so that's my concern that kind of comes up when we think about these conversations.
I'm just going to interject really quick. It's 6:52. We're supposed to start our next meeting in 8 minutes. I am okay just continuing this conversation after our community connections portion of our meeting, and we can finish up the items that we haven't talked about yet, which is Camp Big Springs. We can finish up this. We can finish up Camp Big Springs, and then we can move on with our business items. Is everyone okay just taking an 8-minute break until our next meeting and continuing the conversation there? Is everyone okay with that? Now it's 7-minute break. Okay, was that okay? Okay, let's do that. We'll go ahead and continue this conversation in our business meeting, but for now I'm going to need a motion to adjourn our study session.
Move we adjourn study session.
Okay, we're adjourned. Okay, we'll see everyone at our business meeting at 7 o'clock in the PDC.
Well, I'm sure you did.
You never. I keep my glass on the pizzas and Amy goes.